Here in the United States of America, we have a long and storied tradition, going back over 100 years, of fad dance crazes. In the first half of the 20th century, there was the grizzly bear, the charleston, the duck walk, the conga, the hokey pokey. The 50s gave us the chicken dance and the bunny hop and the hully gully. In the 60s, there was the twist, the locomotion, the mashed potato, the watusi, the limbo, and the shake. The 70s had the time warp, the car wash, the electric slide, the robot, the running man. And who could forget the YMCA? The 80s gave us the moonwalk, the Harlem Shake, the safety dance, the lambada, and the cabbage patch. In the 90s, there was the Humpty dance, the Vogue, the Macarena, and whatever the achy breaky heart dance is called. But as the new millennium dawned, we seemingly lost sight of this proud national tradition. Indeed, with the current century now over 20% complete, its first 2 decades have produced a paucity of credible dance fad crazes with such mediocre, unexceptional entries as the stanky leg, the hoedown throwdown, the nay-nay, and of course, the dab. But no more, says Nancy Pelosi. And so last night, on the occasion of President Corpsey Cadaverton's first State of the Union address, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Gentle Lady from California, showed that she has heard the people of the nation crying out for a fun new dance craze, and being the devoted, selfless public servant that she is, she took matters into her own hands and introduced us all to America's next great dance craze, the Burn Pit Boogie, which our good friends at Fox News have already been nice enough to make an animation of, so rather than me trying to explain all the moves and potentially getting it wrong, let's just have a quick look at the master and the originator of the art form. Here it is. And look, I'm just going to ask the obvious question here, and then we'll cut to the main segment and try to find the answer. What in the actual hell was that? From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the hot dance crazes are the typhus, the cholera, and the Black Death. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and I can report to you tonight, my fellow Americans, that the state of our union is feeble, incoherent, confused, and well past its bedtime. Because leadership, it begins at the top, doesn't it? And government is no different than sports, really. The team always takes on the personality of its head coach. And if we're sticking with sporting metaphors for the moment, having Joe Biden as your president in the year 2022 is rather like hiring a head coach with 42 years of experience in the league and a career record of 0 wins, 672 losses, with all 672 losses being by shutout. But seriously, what the hell was that thing with the burn pits? And let's start on the front end, because Biden bringing it up in the first place, this completely bizarre thing out of left field, is even more bizarre than Nancy Pelosi's sudden, spontaneous invention of the burn pit boogie dance. Now, I don't know who writes Joe Biden's speeches, and it doesn't matter all that much anyway, because by the time the text gets from the teleprompter screen to his brain and to his mouth, it usually bears not even a passing resemblance to the thing they intended for him to say originally, which brings me to my favorite nonsensical quote from last night's speech. The only one I loved so much I had to jot it down on the spot. Quote, "The power of the world in everyday lives." End quote. I don't have the faintest idea what it means or what he was attempting to say. I don't even remember what he was talking about at the time. I just know I really loved that quote. There's something almost poetic in its nonsensicality. It's probably my favorite thing Joe Biden has said since he coined the immortal term "Inanna Pressure," which I always thought sounded rather like the name of an unreleased Iron Butterfly song. Like it could have been the B-side to Inagata Davida. You finish that when you flip over the 45 and then you listen to Inanna Pressure. Now, the reason why I'm wondering about the speechwriter and the thing with the burn pits is because I'm pretty sure it came from a Netflix movie. A movie called The Outpost. A really good movie, actually, which you may have seen, and if not, I do highly recommend it. It's the story of the Battle of Kop Keating in October of 2009, also known as the Battle of Kamdesh in Nuristan province, eastern Afghanistan, which was the battle in which Sergeant Clint Romeshay and Specialist Ty Carter both won the Medal of Honor and both survived the battle. But there's a scene in the movie where Ty Carter and another soldier are on burn pit duty, which means they have to muck out the latrines and burn the contents. And the other guy keeps saying to Carter, "This shit gives you cancer, man. I know this shit gives you cancer, man." And Carter makes fun of him for it. He says, "Dude, we're out here in the ass end of Afghanistan. The Taliban are shooting at us 24 hours a day, and you're worried about dying of cancer?" It's kind of a throwaway scene, really. It only exists mostly as an excuse for that one joke and to show the audience a little bit of what life is like at a remote forward operating base in an active combat zone. And burn pits are part of it because some of those installations are so temporary that operational rules say you're not allowed to dig a permanent latrine. You have to use porta potties and collect the contents every few days, and whoever's on top of the CO's shit list that day, because sometimes a shit list is a literal thing, they get to go burn it all until it's nice and incinerated. So to hear Joe Biden tell it last night, these tubs full of urine and feces are the most dangerous thing a U.S. combat infantryman will ever encounter in the course of his deployment. Because this is a president who has his priorities straight, ladies and gentlemen. Joe sort of takes the opposite of the logical approach that Ty Carter took in the movie scene. He flips that reasoning right on its head. Now, who cares about the enemy shooting at us when we might get cancer from these shit fumes? And then before you know it, it's in and on a Shabbat Brescia. And if you don't understand that, you ain't black. Now, there's nothing I don't love about this weird sojourn that the president took into talking up the dangers of burning fecal matter, but the thing I love most is when he tried to list the types of detritus that get burned in said burn pits. Waste, garbage, the debris of war, jet fuel. All right, pump the brakes, Grandpa. Did you just say jet fuel? And did the speechwriter actually write that, or did you just throw it in for shits and giggles? No pun intended. But this leaves me with numerous questions. First, burn pits are only used at very remote forward operating bases by units of Army infantrymen. Now, where exactly would Army infantrymen get jet fuel from? And second, Joe, did you ever stop to consider the logistics of what would actually happen if you poured jet fuel into a pit and then lit it on fire? I mean, do I really need to explain the details here? Needless to say, your unit would have a fairly atrocious casualty rate, and it wouldn't be from combat. Jet fuel. Come on, man. It reminds me, frankly, of that glorious moment when he gave you your name, Jim Eagle. When you can see his thought process in real time, when you can practically hear the rusty old gears grinding together up in his brain, and he's thinking, okay, we're talking about Jim Crow, but I want it to sound worse than Jim Crow, so what do I do here? What's a bird that's bigger than a crow? An eagle. Jim Eagle. That's it. Jim fucking Eagle. And I think this was probably a similar case. The script probably said gasoline, which is what they actually use with burn pits, but Joe thought, gasoline just doesn't sound scary enough. What's something that's even more flammable than gasoline? I've got it! Jet fuel! He's not the leader of the free world for nothing, folks. And it probably still hasn't occurred to him that an infantry platoon at a forward operating base would never have jet fuel in its possession for any reason. Now, my next question is this, and it's a two-parter. Did anybody from the Attorney General's office review this speech in advance? And did the president read it in any sort of comprehensive way ahead of time? The reason I ask is because Joe's casual remark about burn pits giving you cancer could well wind up being a remark that launches hundreds of thousands of lawsuits, potentially by every former service member who was ever anywhere near a burn pit and gets a cancer diagnosis at some point later in life. There were a lot of incredibly stupid things in this speech, but I think this might have been the stupidest. There isn't any sort of medical evidence that says brief exposures to a burning cocktail of gasoline and human waste causes cancer or could potentially cause cancer, but here we have the President of the United States announcing in public during a nationally televised address that, These burn pits, they'll give you cancer all right. Which raises a further question. Does this man's stupidity have any boundaries whatsoever? Do you think he realizes he just gave an engraved invitation for the U.S. government to be sued for wrongful death by every cancer victim who ever served at an installation where burn pits were part of the sanitation protocol? Do you think he comprehends how many billions of dollars are potentially going to have to be paid out by the government in judgments and settlements because he just felt like throwing in a cute remark to make burn pits sound a little bit more scary? And does anybody have any idea what the hell Pelosi was doing? Joe starts talking about burn pits, which is weird to begin with, and within 3 or 4 seconds she's got this smile on her face like she just won a sweepstakes in which the grand prize was free unlimited vodka for life. Like burn pit cancer is the most happy, wonderful thing she has ever heard of. So happy, so wonderful that she was powerless to keep herself from engaging in a spontaneous dancing fit. Like she was Kevin Bacon in Footloose, doing that burn pit boogie like there's no tomorrow. Like mom and dad are gone for the weekend and it's time to get our freak on. Now, Joe Biden is not a president who is normally burdened by an abundance of good judgment, so it came as no surprise that he opted against quitting while he was ahead here. So he found himself sitting at the intersection of end the story and do no further damage avenue and double down and make shit 10 times worse boulevard. And he took a hard left turn onto the boulevard because of course he did. And he promptly ran over several pedestrians, but that's not important now, and they were probably unvaccinated anyway. So he starts down this path that was never a good idea to begin with. I don't know what the speechwriter could possibly have been thinking, honestly, with the burn pit thing. The only guess I have is that he really enjoyed that scene in that movie. It was the first mention of the U.S. military in the entire speech, which was most of the way over by that point. And the thing he mentions is latrines? But if you're Joe Biden and there is any skill you possess in abundance, it is the ability to use poor judgment and meager intelligence to make a bad thing many orders of magnitude worse. So as Joe surveys the half-empty room last night, and it was fun how they pretended it was social distancing after they noticed that the room was half-empty. But anyway, with his speech passing the 50-minute mark, he thinks 2 things. 1, he thinks, doggone it, it's 10 o'clock, I missed Murder, She Wrote. And 2, he thinks, how can I take this ill-advised soliloquy about military sewage policy and make it even more cringe-inducingly embarrassing than it is already? And then it hits him. I've got it. I will talk about my dead son. People love it when I do that. Nobody ever criticizes me for the loathsome habit of using my own dead child as a political stage prop whenever it happens to be convenient. And this was probably, all things being equal, the most embarrassing part of an already comically bad performance. Which is precisely what we all expected, because it is late period Joe Biden after all, and comically bad performances are the professional vineyard in which this man toils. The guy would have been the worst president in history even if he had been elected in his prime 35 years ago. If it can even be said that Joe Biden had a prime. But I digress. So Joe goes on to say, and it was difficult to tell here if he was still on prompter or just completely winging it. Yeah, I don't know if my dead son, Major Beau Biden, my dead son who's deceased, who's not alive anymore, whose widow my other son promptly had sex with right after the funeral because we Bidens are all about class and decorum. I don't know if his fatal brain cancer, because he died of cancer, if I forgot to mention that, because he's my dead son, and that's how he became my dead son. I don't know if that was from the burn pits that he was around when he was in the army, and just, my God, man. So sometimes words fail one, and one is left simply to facepalm in amazement at the thing to which one has just borne witness. But just to clear this up for you, Joe, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that your son, Major Beau Biden, whose overseas service was mostly in the green zone in Baghdad, who was sleeping mostly in 4-star hotels and presidential palaces, I'm guessing that 1, he was never deployed anywhere near any installation where burn pits would have been part of the sanitation protocol, and 2, even if he had been, what part of major do you not understand? Because yeah, it's totally normal for senior officers to be the ones mucking out the latrine while the privates and the corporals and the NCOs all sit around watching. Am I right? And look, It would be easy. It is easy to laugh at this guy for being such a ridiculously ignorant buffoon who tries to give insights on topics he doesn't understand, but at the same time, it's not funny. It's not remotely funny when that man is also the commander-in-chief of the U.S. Armed Forces and has the nuclear codes in his possession. Now, call me paranoid, but when a guy doesn't even understand that officers don't muck out latrines, what does that tell us about his broader understanding of military and strategic matters in general? And say whatever the hell you want about Trump, but I guarantee you Trump doesn't think majors pull burn pit duty. And not to belabor the point, but at a time when nearly everybody in the Democrat Party and many people in the Republican Party have been practically swooning and making googly eyes over the prospect of us fighting an actual war with the Russians, should we be troubled by the fact that in his first State of the Union speech, in a moment of heightened global tension where there is a full-scale ground war already happening in Eastern Europe, that President Biden made no sustained mention of the U.S. Armed Forces until the very tail end of the speech, and when he did, he spent nearly the whole time musing about latrines and sanitation and jet fuel? I guess there's probably a great STD joke in there somewhere. Alright, I've got it. Only time I ever pissed jet fuel was after my first trip to Tijuana. And if anybody has a working theory for what the hell Pelosi was doing, which, to recap, was shit-eating grin at the first mention of army latrines, followed by bigger shit-eating grin, followed by spontaneously standing up and doing a weird sort of reverse Cabbage Patch dance for an uncomfortably long period of time, followed by finally sitting back down, having imparted the gift to the world in what may be the final last meaningful act of her insufferably long political career of the burn pit boogie. But if you've got any sort of reasonable explanation for whatever it was we saw there, please do enlighten us in the comments. And yes, in case you're wondering, I really very much did want to compose a song to go along with the dance, but I was stymied, flummoxed, utterly defeated by the fact that there are no goddamn words in the English language that rhyme with boogie. But again, if you should happen to think of one, please do clue me in, because there is nothing more annoying than being unable to think of a rhyme. In summation tonight, Joe Biden gave us a silly, embarrassing speech because Joe Biden is a silly, embarrassing man. And the people who are writing his content, whomever those people might be, they seem unburdened by any concern about articulating a philosophical framework for the administration going forward, as evidenced by the fact that rather sizable portions of last night's text seem to have been lifted from a scene in a Netflix movie where a couple of guys joke about getting cancer from poop fumes. So yes, just like always, it seems even more absurd when you say it out loud, but there it is. That's where we are now. Joe Biden's America, where the poop fumes are so strong they make old ladies get up and dance. Too bad you couldn't fit that on a bumper sticker. It wouldn't be half bad as a campaign slogan. Could you even imagine if they actually let Joe run for re-election and you had to be the guy who came up with the bumper sticker slogans? Talk about unrewarding jobs. Vote Joe Biden, because the only thing we have to fear is Corn Pop himself. Vote Joe Biden, because he's got a dead son who died of cancer from poop fumes. Vote Joe Biden, because 8 million Civil War veterans can't be wrong. Vote Joe Biden, because his illegitimate stripper grandbaby will be sad if you don't. Vote Joe Biden, because Reverend Kane from Poltergeist 2 thinks he's a handsome young fella. Vote Joe Biden, because he's bound to get something right eventually. And alright, maybe that last one is a little bit too much on the rosily optimistic side, but we'll leave it there for tonight. I'll see you Friday. Thank you very much for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.